Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. I'm your boy Brian, that's Rob. We are happy to have you with us again this week. Rob, what are we going to cover this week?
Well, this week, it was obviously race week, so we will be crawling all over Imola, and we will just go through our normal format. We'll do some news and social, we will take a little walk through race week, practice, quali, sprint race, and then the main event. And then we will also go through some fantasy, because F1 site has pulled its finger out and actually got the site updated before we've come to air, which is fantastic, although not fantastic news for me because now I know the result. And then we've got a DRS episode as well, another guest to come on the show, so it's action-packed, Brian.
I'm excited. I can't wait to get into it all. I especially look forward to the fantasy section because I beat you. Okay, anyway, let's move on. So, as you said, start where we started this week. I gotta say, I was really excited by the cheesiest video ever. Red Bull did their Sergio Perez drives from New York to Miami to do a lap of the track, and Christian Horner is on the phone with him, and blah, blah, blah. It was so overdone, and I was there for it. Sign me up every day of the week. Checo is the man. I lived in New York. I loved watching him go through Manhattan. But then for me, I loved it. What can I say? Watching him down in Miami running the track. I am so excited for the Miami GP in 2 weeks. I love that video. It was off the charts, cheesy, ridiculous. And I still loved it.
And I think when you decide that you're going to go that cheesy, you have to go big or go home, because there's no point being semi-cheesy because people are not sure whether you meant it to be cheesy or not, or whether it's just bad production. So you need to leave no doubt in anyone's mind that we are going for full-on cheese factor 10. And they got it. You shared that, and I was like, this is funny.
I mean, they put an alligator in front of the car. I mean, come on. How much stuff do you have to do to make it ridiculous? But I loved it. I loved it. And it is a good preview for 2 weeks from now, and we'll talk about next week. We'll give a little preview of the Miami GP, but coming up soon, very exciting. The second thing I wanted to hit real quick was F1 22, it's called now, the new video game for the season will drop July 1st, which is about when they usually drop. Summertime, June, July, I think is pretty much the average time frame. I'm excited because it sounds like there'll be good features in it, but in the little teaser trailer that they put out, it was just a clip of an animatronic car. There was what was the point? Couldn't they have waited 2 more weeks and gotten some gameplay in there or something? I didn't. And the best was some people on Twitter went to town with this and started making up parts of the game. And my favorite was porpoising mode, where they decided that, you could have different levels of porpoising. You could have standard, medium, or Carlos Sainz, which turned out to be a rough week for Carlos Sainz and his porpoising.
I think there were 7 or 8 pictures on that Instagram account that had gone through all the different features that were coming out. Because when I was first flicking through it, I thought it was a real feature list. I wasn't really reading it properly. And then I went back, started flicking through it and saw the porpoising one. And they really ripped into kind of F1. It was brilliantly done.
So well done.
It was. I think we may have even shared it. I can't remember if we shared it out on the Twitter account or not. It was very well done. And if we haven't shared it, we will. It's very fun, and we won't do it justice trying to read it out. But it's
Well, I'm excited for the game to come out, and one thing that I do, this is inside my nerdiness for F1 and how much I love it. Each week before a new race, I will play that course so that I feel like I know that course. And I'm not really good, and I don't play people online. I will just go out and run basically time trials myself in whatever car I feel like, and kind of go around the track just to learn the track. And, I'll play 3 or 4 times, just enough to kind of get a feel for it. And my wife will come downstairs and say, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm learning the track." She goes, "Why do you have to learn the track?" I go, "It's fun. It's important."
I got my hand up, Brian.
Yeah, please, sir.
Do you know why?
What?
Fellow nerd. I did exactly the same thing. I've been driving Imola all week. It's on the old game, but it is. I've started trying to drive the tracks before the races, and it's stupid then when you're watching it and you're like, oh yeah, here he comes, left-hander, get ready.
This is the part where I always go off the curb and into the corner.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still not very good on that game. I have turned off the racing line. That was a big kind of thing to let go of for me because
You're better than I am. Because whenever they show the in-car, I'm always like, where are the green lines?
I just don't have I don't have the full kit. I don't have like a chair and pedals and a steering wheel. I'm good old fashioned thumbs, and I don't think that game. It's fun to play, but I think it really has been designed for people that want to take it a bit more seriously and have steering wheel. So if anyone wants to send us one, that would be great. Me and Brian would happily take all singing, all dancing, fully loaded car, seat, pedals, and steering wheel.
I mean, of course, but that is. I'm a controller player as well. So let all the real streamers and all the fans of the podcast who know what they're doing make fun of us now, but we do what we can. A couple other quick notes. Just this week was a lot of Ferrari. Obviously, being at Imola in Italy, the Emilia-Romagna region, it was a lot of Ferrari on the lead up to the race. And part of it was Ferrari released on their social their C-Squared Challenge. They had a couple of them, one with egg and spoon race, one with a pasta competition. Those were fine. But then Carlos, the big news in my mind was we ended up getting a new contract for Carlos and the smooth operator sticking around for quite some time. And I'm excited for Ferrari. I'm excited for Carlos. He has been, I think, outstanding the last handful of years in F1, not just at Ferrari, but at McLaren before that. Obviously, he didn't celebrate the weekend the way he would have wanted. But, I mean, what do you think, Rob? When you look at Ferrari with Charles and Carlos Sainz, for the next handful of years, are you as excited as I am? Or?
Yes, I am. I just... There's this really weird trend in sport in general where you can't get away from the feeling that people go through a period of just being, I don't want to say cursed, like some kind of like witch has put some spell on them, but they basically go through a period in their career where if they didn't have bad luck, they just have no luck. And sometimes drivers, and it happens in other sports as well, they're able to kind of deal with the punches as they hit and kind of get back up, dust themselves down and go again. And others don't. They kind of get sucked down into this kind of, oh, woe is me, everything's always going to go wrong for me. And I think a negative mental attitude, if you think bad things are going to happen, bad things tend to happen, right? And everyone sort of thought maybe that happened with Valtteri at Mercedes, that he just got stuck in this shadow number 2 driver and couldn't ever feel the full potential of that car. I know it's only 2 races that Sainz is now. I think there's a stat that he's now done 1 lap out of the last 2 races.
That is correct.
But it's just heading in that always Carlos type circle at the moment. So I hope he can snap out of it. I really hope he has a good Miami race. I really do. We'll get on to what happened today shortly. But yes, I'm excited. I think they're a good pairing. I think it makes sense from Ferrari to keep them together, help develop the car. They look like they've hit the new regulations running. So why, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just hope that maybe this is just a blip of a couple of runs of bad luck.
Yeah, I'm excited for Ferrari. I think that's a great driver pairing. They seem to get along well, which I think is a big deal as well. As teammates and as people working to develop the car, like you said, I'm excited. I think it's great. He deserves it. We closed last year when we first kicked off this pod, and we'd realized that Carlos had the most points for a non-race winner. And again, we've talked about the point adjustments in 2010, so it's not quite the same as it had been through history, but it's his time. He's due. And you're right. A couple weeks of bad luck. It does feel like he's got a little bit of that second driver curse, which occasionally happens at the top teams. I'm hoping that's over for Miami, and he can go out there and everyone who's put your pins in your Carlos Sainz voodoo dolls, take those out. It's time to let the man run and breathe and have a good time. So my last note before we talk about the race weekend, and it was a long race weekend being a sprint, was one more Ferrari note. I apologize. We aren't normally this Ferrari heavy, an Italian heavy, but Charles Leclerc was robbed. I think it was like Monday of the week or Tuesday. And at first they talked about his Richard Mille watch, $320,000 watch, where he got out of a car to pose with some fans, sign some autographs, and someone took the watch off his hand. A couple days later, it was announced that the watch that was stolen was a unique 2 million pound piece. It was the RM6702 Charles Leclerc, designed especially for him. It was effectively priceless, but a similar prototype was sold at auction for 2.1 million Swiss francs, apparently. So I don't know how much the watch cost. I don't know what exactly happened. But it sounds as though, regardless of the price, he got out of a car to be a good guy, to sign some autographs, take some pictures, and someone ripped a watch off his hand. And that is effed up, man. So
Yeah.
I was bummed to hear it. I'm happy he's all right. And if the person out there did that is listening by any long stretch of the imagination, stop listening. You're not a dirty cider. Get out of here. I'm solving crimes here, man. I'm solving crimes.
Are you? You're really just killing listenership. But I mean,
I don't want them as a dirty cider.
Give the watch back, and then you can carry on listening.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So that kind of rounded out the week, and then we arrived at Imola, ready to rock. And it's kind of, there were multiple twists and turns. In a way, there was maybe more twists and turns in the build-up to the race than in the actual race itself. But we had a very wet P1 where Ferrari absolutely dominated. They were miles clear. Max came in third, and then as they're calling it now, the white Ferrari of Haas came in fourth and fifth. I was looking at this and going, what is going on? We know we've always talked about this kind of, not sandbagging, but practice is practice, and it's not really very, very reflective. But that was a good performance from Haas in the wet. They'll be kind of looking, I think they'll be ruining the fact that Mother Nature didn't send a little bit more rain their way today.
Yeah. It was fascinating to me that with that rain and then that led up to a wet qualifying, Albon still managed to have his car catch fire in qualifying. And it was a big fire, and then an explosion in the back, and it was wet.
It was like they caught it, and you could see the smoke, and then the camera panned around, or the car drove around, and you saw the flames coming out, and you're like, "Ooh, okay, that's on fire." And then it kind of like whatever it was, something popped in the wheel, in the casing, and it shot something out to the side. I'm like, this is just going all kinds of bad. You need to be, but he carried on driving as if he was oblivious to it, but he couldn't have been.
Well, then he lost his brake pedal, the right rear brakes. I'm like, yeah, they're on fire, Alex. And the funny thing is, that happened to Nicky Latifi in testing. So apparently the Williams like the spontaneous combustion of the rear brakes.
But that sprint quali was just, it was just like red flag bonanza, and it was just.
Wait, you mean the Friday qualifying, or are you talking?
Yeah,
sprint
the
race?
quali, yeah. No, sorry, the sprint quali. The sprint quali was just. It really came down to pure luck in a lot of those things, the way that whole thing panned out. And I like that. I like the way that it can kind of shake everything up like that. The combination of drying track, more rain come in, red flags ruining people's runs. It was a good qualification. I really enjoyed watching that all the way through.
Well, I mean, Carlos in Q2 had his problem where he couldn't get back going, and it was a new engine, and I'm watching him, and I'm like, God, no, what is happening here? He's had problems the whole year. And then the rain was coming. So someone joked Sainz pulled a Latifi by kind of pushing the timing of qualifying back. And I would just like to say, for everybody like me, who was sitting in meetings on Friday here in America trying to watch quali while trying to work, man, that was hard. Could we have less red flags on Friday qualifying, please? It's got to be more concise. Like, I was really struggling, and I had
the day off. I was fine, Brian. I don't know what you're worrying about. I sat and watched the whole thing and loved it.
Yeah, you punk. And then one last thing in Q2 is, who was it? Was it Paul? Paul DeResta doing the commentary with Crofty, and he talked about the Rain-X, because Charles talked about getting some Rain-X on his visor. And does Crofty not know what Rain-X is? Is that not a British thing? Do you know what Rain-X is?
Yeah, I know what it is, yeah.
Okay. I was very confused how he wouldn't know. And just as a car guy, whenever I wax my car, I usually wax the front windshield because it acts like Rain-X. And you don't have to apply Rain-X. But I often Rain-X my windshields, and then I'll drive around and drive my wife nuts because I don't turn my wipers on, unless it's really heavy. And she's like, are you going to turn them on? I'm like, I don't need them. I'll just go faster, and it'll bead faster and roll off the back. And so when Paul DeResta was talking about the Rain-X, and Crofty was so confused, I'm like, no, he's trying to get the beads so you can get them off the rain off the visor. It's you don't need the tear-offs for that. So it was fascinating to hear the Rain-X debate, and I'm sitting there yelling, who doesn't Rain-X?
But I mean, yeah, it was good quali, and then we got that whole thing where now that means that Max in Q3, by finishing first, gets pole position, even though he might not win the sprint race, which he does eventually anyway. But I'm not happy with this, Brian. I gotta say, I think the guy that starts the race on Sunday in that number one stop is pole position. This whole changing the rules to, like I said, I understand. I think we said it last week. I understand kind of why they have, because the person that finishes Q3 at the top is pole, but it's not, is it?
No, you're right. You're totally right. Hey, one last thing on qualifying, just before we move on to the sprint race. Can we give a shout out to Kevin Magnussen? We've probably, as American homers, we've totally been too big into Haas. I know that, and we've been too excited about Haas. But in Q3, when he slid into the gravel, and then had the presence to get the car into drive so he could get off the gravel and up to the grass and the track there, so he wouldn't get beached and he could get the car going again. Holy cow, that was probably my favorite driving moment of 2022 so far. It blew my mind. It blew my mind that he was able to save that in the gravel trap.
But did you hear the comments? Because this was the last note I had on it as well, was because they red flagged it. The red flag came out when K-Mag went over to the gravel, and then he was able to recover it and keep going and put in a great performance. But then the commentators were saying, well, actually, once a race is red flagged, you shouldn't. There was something in the rules they were reading out about you're not allowed to rejoin. You can take no further part in the session if you're out because of a red flag. And it's like, well, but he wasn't out. The person in charge of the red flag button has kind of gone a little early there. And I'd never seen a red flag come out that quickly. Kevin Magnussen's car wasn't even at a standstill.
And he wasn't near the track either. He was on the other side of the gravel trap. He was still in somewhat danger, but it wasn't like he's on the side of the track sideways.
Someone's looked at that and gone, well, he's not catching that, and he's in the gravel, so we're going to have to get the crane out. So, boop, red flag. That's the noise the button makes, by the way. Boop. And then all of a sudden he recovers it and gets back on again. I thought, oh, please don't let this be some sort of technicality where Magnussen now gets time doesn't count and gets dropped to the bottom of quali. But it didn't. They were all kind of worried about it, and then it went away and nobody said anything again. I thought, okay, that's best forgotten. Let's just sweep that one under the carpet and not mention that again. Because he did a good job. And again, Mick Schumacher, he seems to have no look either. He was on an absolute blinding lap as well when the red flag came out, and then I think he was on another one, a good one again when Norris, Lando decided, well, people might take my position, so I'm just going to drive this thing. I better end this so that no one can knock me off the spot I'm in. Because it wasn't really a crash. When I looked at it back and I said to you, oh, he's crashed out, and he said, well, he hasn't really. He's kind of driven up to a wall and parked it and just kissed the wall ever so slightly to do no damage.
And then stopped the session. Like in Monaco last year when Charles had pole and Max was behind him on a really steaming lap and Charles hit the wall, that stopped the session and he got himself pole by stopping the session. However, he really hit the wall. He damaged his car. He couldn't race, right? This was the exact opposite, where Lando's third. There are people behind him on some pretty serious laps, and he just pulls off in the grass, kisses the wall, red flag, ends the session, and he stays third, and his car's fine. They just had to wipe some grass off the tires, and he goes back out there the next day. I think, you mentioned Mick, and we're about to hit the sprint quali, the sprint race, but I would just say this. There are 5 people, and I'm doing a hand gesture 5. There are 5 people who walked away from this race really excited this weekend. And I know we're not at the race yet, but I got to say it because I'm going to forget. Checo, Lando. Both of them had great races. They were really excited. I think you have to look at Yuki. I think you have to look at Valtteri being very excited. And my 5th person is Nikita Mazepin, because Mick was spinning all over the place in that car, and Mazepin must have been standing somewhere in Russia going, see, it's not just me.
Well, yeah.
I know you love Mick and have a soft spot for Mick, but man, he was Mick backwards more than he was forward.
Mick spun twice and out of just trying to overpush it, whereas Mazepin didn't seem to be able to, pulling away in a straight line was a challenge for him. So I don't think he's in the same. You can't be putting Mick in the same bracket as Mazepin. I won't have it.
I just did it.
Well, you're wrong. You can't help being wrong. I guess you'll have to learn to do it.
Well, we'll get to the fantasy scores in a minute. So let's talk about the sprint race itself. Does Pierre Gasly ever have a good sprint race? And it's not his fault. Someone always hits him or cuts across him or something always happens to him. This time, Zhou Guanyu cut across him and took out his right front tire, and he had to come back to the pits. Do you remember it was Monza, I think, last year? He went flying off. He was pushed off by Carlos or someone, I can't remember, and he went flying off and had a crash. The sprint format is not good for Pierre, and this whole weekend was terrible for Pierre.
Yeah, but you've jumped ahead. I'm giving you a black and white flag here, or a 5-second stop-go penalty for jumping the start here, because we've got to... Before we get to
Max's
the point
bad start?
Oh, yeah.
I'm on the first lap. I mean, I'm still there. What, Max had a bad start. All right, go.
Max does all that effort to get that the pole, and then just seems to put it in reverse off the start. He looked like the alpha from the beginning of the season when Valtteri didn't know if pushing the pedal was going to actually go forward or not. And then he kind of shouted into the radio. He made a sarcastic comment about, "Oh, that was a great gear sync there, guys." So maybe, I guess it was technical. I don't think maybe he screwed up or he decided to make the sarcastic comment to deflect away from his poor start. I don't know. I'm not an F1 driver, but it was just terrible. It's just got bogged down. And then, like you say, we got the shunt and we had the safety car out. The bizarre thing that we kind of saw in the sprint race, I made a note of it, and I don't know what happened. Maybe we'll talk about it later when we get onto the race, but I made a note that in sprint race, the DRS was exceptionally powerful. Yes. It was just like a hoover that just sucked you along and just catapulted you past. Basically, if you got DRS, going down the back straight, you were overtaking the guy in front. No, unless he got the DRS from the guy in front as well, no questions asked. As long as you were within that second, you were just turbocharging. It was like Roadrunner. Me, I'm just coming past.
But especially strong for Red Bull and Ferrari. So I think it's worth noting that it helped everybody. But Red Bull and Ferrari, when Checo came by, I forgot who he passed. I mean, he went by him at like 400 miles an hour more. It looked like a video game. Like someone had an extra gear. Like, well, my car goes up to 11. I mean, it didn't make any sense how fast he went by. So I agree with you. It was very strong DRS on Saturday. But again, I feel as though we had cars, Carlos and Checo, who were back further in faster cars. And it just felt different. Because when the race started, the Ferraris and the Red Bulls were at the front. So it was, and then there was no DRS until, like lap 98. So
no DRS until the end of time, but we'll come on to that shortly. Yeah. So,
the one last thing in the start on the sprint race, Kevin Magnussen, the best weaving I've ever seen anyone do in an actual race. It was disgusting, to be honest. He was going back and forth so fast on that first lap, and Checo's trying to go back and forth around him. He got a black and white flag, just a warning. It looked like Stevie Wonder was driving the car.
He was warming his tires.
No, you don't warm your tires when you're actually racing down a straight. You don't start warming your tires like that. That was insane. He was going left, right, left. Fernando Alonso probably looked at it and said, "Boy, that's a lot."
Yeah. I mean, the reason I said that, the commentators threw that in there of, he is on the mediums, because both Hasses, I think they were the only two on the mediums.
And Latifi, I took notes. I'm the tire guy. Both Hasses and Latifi were on mediums, which made no sense at the time and even afterwards. But
and then it was like it was going to make sense. Quite late in the race, there was a radio message that came through to say softs are starting to wear out now, so now we're coming into the optimum point where the mediums are going to kick in. So I got all caught up in that message. I was like, "Ooh, genius stroke from Haas. Let's watch them knife through butter." And then literally nothing happened. Whoever's in charge of the tyre strategy at Haas needs to be kind of shown their cardboard box on their desk tomorrow morning, because that was not a good choice. But they stayed pretty competitive on that tyre. Now, maybe that was the right tyre for the Haas car, and if they'd been on soft, it just wouldn't have worked out for them. Or if not, then they missed a real trick, because if the soft would have worked even better for them, then they could have been higher up even.
Well, on today's grid walk, they did ask K-Mag about it, and he said he did preferred softs. So he would have preferred softs yesterday in the sprint race. You know what? As a whole, I enjoyed the sprint. I thought it was fun to watch. Valtteri took Fernando late. It was some great late braking of his own. I actually think Valtteri had an amazing weekend. I think he should be one of the drivers who's looked at as having a top-notch weekend, not just in the race, not just in sprint, but he was fantastic throughout. And then the last 3 laps. How great were the last 3 laps? Max and Charles. I mean, holy cow, how great was that?
No, I mean, Max on Charles, it's... and in a way, that's kind of what was disappointing about today, because we got the teaser trailer And then it was like one of those times where Marvel put something in a teaser trailer for a movie, and then that's not in the final cut of the movie. And you're like, well, hang on a minute, I saw the Hulk in the trailer, and where is he now? And that was a little bit like those last 3 laps. Like, oh, tomorrow's going to be so good. And then we arrived at today.
Yeah.
So
you and I did connect about this. So the race today felt a lot like, for me, I would call it Australia 2.0. Meaning it was an enjoyable enough race to watch. A little boring for the main 2/3 of it in the middle. A little bit of action in the first few laps and a little bit of action at the last couple laps, last 10 laps. Unfortunately, Carlos was some of the action in the first couple laps again.
Yeah, so let's take a look at that, because this was kind of like a perfect storm, but a perfect storm of how to probably snatch a really good race away from us. So, it was wet at the beginning, but it wasn't. It was damp/moist. I'll use that word. Anyway, and it wasn't wet enough, and you knew it wasn't really going to be a wet race. So, and you could see it was drying, and they were kind of telling us about rain that might come in 20 minutes. So everybody was hedging their bets of, well, don't want to burn these inters out, because if the rain comes back again, we might want to keep them. So it's kind of weather didn't really play the part it could have done. I think you either want a full-on dry race at Imola, or you want monsoon to bring out the proper wets and have a real wet race. This middle thing just didn't play out well. Then the worst thing that could possibly happen, Sainz gets tagged, or racing incident, whatever you want to call it. Sainz gets taken out on the first corner, and Perez jumps through, and now we've got both Red Bulls out front. And that was the worst thing that can possibly happen, in football, soccer. A player getting a red card in the first few minutes of a big high-profile game is not what you want. It's just going to ruin the spectacle, and it felt like the red card, because now you haven't got 2 Ferraris chasing down the Red Bulls. You've also got both Red Bulls free and able to go and put some distance. And I don't know why Leclerc didn't have the pace to catch Perez at that beginning, but also because we're damp, we're not in DRS world either.
Right.
So we just kind of got at the front. What could have been was just taken away from us in that first corner. We really needed Leclerc not to have an absolute terrible start like he did. We needed
Right.
Sainz not to get spun out. And if we could have just had the Ferrari split in the Red Bulls or vice versa, and we could have just had some real kind of the 2 of them, or the 4 of them, sorry, the 2 teammates going head-to-head for a bit of time, I think we could have had a really good race, but it was kind of all done in that first corner. That's just my 5 cents anyway.
I mean, I wouldn't. Why 5 cents? Isn't
don't
it
know.
2 cents? The phrase is 2 cents. You're giving me 3 extra cents. What the hell am I going to do with these 3 pennies?
I'm better than you, so I can give you 5 cents. You've only got 2 cents to give.
Us Americans call it my 2 cents. So I would just say, yeah, I can't disagree. When Carlos got spun around and Danny Rick was like pushing him, and then you saw him quickly hit the throttle, which just buried the car. Like, I was hoping Kevin Magnussen's approach would somehow work for Carlos to get out of that gravel trap. Just like slowly put it in neutral and coast backwards through. I mean, I don't know, do something. Don't just floor it forward when you're going backwards. Just right into the bottom of the gravel pit.
Yeah, I mean, no offense to Australian fans, but I kind of wish the roles had been reversed, and it was Danny Rick that had got beached and Sainz was able to kind of be forward.
Oh no, don't do that. Mark's going to put a hit out
Sorry,
on you.
Mark. But Sainz going in backwards was never ending good, whereas Danny Rick was able to do the kind of the coast over, find the safety escape road and rejoin. So that ruined the upfront bit. So then I was like, okay, this is maybe going to be that podium midfield battle. And it kind of gave it us for a little bit. We got K-Mag, George and Bottas in a 3-way where it was like, this looks like they're going to be wrestling for position for a long time. And it was kind of giving us that wheel to wheel, but then it just kind of stopped.
There wasn't really like a lot of overtaking. And the funny thing is, George moved up to 6th. George! How did that happen? Like, we didn't see any of it. We had no idea. All of a sudden, we just take it on faith that George is 6th. And then he's battling the rest of the way. And like you said, it got a little tasty with K-Mag and George going after each other. And then Valtteri stuck his nose right in there. He's like, hey, guys, remember me? You know what I had for breakfast? I had some
porridge.
So he was right there, ready to go. And he's like, I'm in this. He's like, you are not denying me. And it was fun to watch. But then, like, that battle...
It just ebbed away,
Yeah, and like even the stuff at the back when you had, and I'm a little early here, but because then there was, in my mind, I had all that, and then there was a lull. I had a lull, and then a huge lull, and then...
So wait there, one second, on the lull, the one
Yeah.
thing that I wrote down in the lull, and this kind of epitomizes the lull, is that I wrote down that the commentator spent most of the time debating what class 0 to 1 rain was. Because one of the, I can't remember, it was the Ferrari radio message, but one of the radio messages says, we're expecting class 0 to 1 rain in the next 20 minutes. Lando's was it. And they were like, the fact that they then spent the rest of that lap deciding, is class 0 to 1 enough to get an umbrella out, or is it just spotting? And it's like, oh my God, we're debating what class 0 to 1 rain is here because there's nothing to talk about on the race. And then as it kind of dried, and they all decided to bolt first slicks after I think Ricciardo had tried it first, and he
went to the
he lit the board up purple on every sector. We had like pit lane mayhem, and we had early releases and people almost crashing into everybody, and I thought, yes, this is the adrenaline injection that this needs to get this race back up again.
Nope. Nope. You know, it was such a lull. My high point was every time the Imola camera angle of people coming out of the pits is fantastic because it's at race level, aimed back at the pit lane, but it's like closed. So all of a sudden the car appears at the end of the pit lane, coming out, and then you can see when they pass the pit limiter and they can put it down, and they all just nail it. They light up their tires, and each car kind of slides around as they put the power down. That was my favorite view. For me, the middle of the race was who could do the best burnout leaving pit lane but still have traction. And I love tires. I love strategy. We all saw Esteban come out and run Hamilton into the wall and hit him. I mean, he deserves a penalty on that. It's probably not he deserves it. His team shouldn't have released him. But man, it was boring. And then
we had Bottas in the hard
was,
we had Bottas in his like ridiculously long stop, just as he was putting in a really good stint.
It was like 8 seconds or something extra. That was bad. And then but then even later on when Charles came out, I'm going to fast forward a little. I'll let you go back if you like. But when Charles came out later, and he came out right in front of Checo, and I think they were both on the mediums at this point. I can't even remember. And then Checo just passes him. Like, no DRS. He just drives motors past him when his tires were up to temp and Charles's weren't. And it was just fascinating to watch. Like you said, there wasn't a lot of passing. There was a lot of close following. I don't know if it was because the track was wet, and in order to get around someone, you had to go into the wet, and it would mess up your braking points, and you may lose traction and control. I don't know. But with no DRS...
well, let's hit that. So, and the commentators said it. We've had DRS on wet races when the cars are still on intermediates, but there's kind of a dry line appearing. They've pulled the trigger and gone to DRS. We had like bone dry sections. The guys are all out on slicks, and it just seemed to take an eternity to do it. And by the time it then kicked in, I don't know. I don't even think we saw a DRS overtake. It just didn't seem to and maybe you make a good point. I hate to admit it, but you make a good point about maybe it was the faster cars coming through the field that gave us the false sense that the DRS was going to be useful. Imola feels that maybe it needs a second DRS somewhere, but I don't
not a
know.
good long enough straight to do it. And honestly, Imola is also a narrower track, and you could see that overtaking was harder. I love the chicanes they have, but it just. Yeah, it was rough. It was very processional. The rain, I think, helped with that, and then losing some of the leaders, I think, made it a little boring, and even the pit stops weren't great. But the last 10 laps, I did very much enjoy. I don't know about you, but
it kind of then got a little second shot in the arm where let's leave the Ferrari Red Bull thing for a second, maybe. But as the not out of nowhere, but Valtteri just got a second wind. I don't know if the tyres came good or came into the zone, or if it was George's tyres that were starting to go a little bit and he was conserving them. But Valtteri also just became a man on a mission and was absolutely hunting George down. And that got really good. That got nice wheel-to-wheel racing. Another example of how close these cars can run. But again, George did a phenomenal job of just, whether it's constantly harvesting and using his overtake button or whatever at the right times to fend off DRS. But I was convinced Valtteri was getting him. I absolutely was.
I was too, and I was sure it was going to happen, but George held on, did a great job. One thing we haven't talked about, and we need to, is what happened to Lewis. And Like I'll bare my soul. I'll be open for all the dirty siders here. I love Lewis. I've been a Lewis fan for a very long time. I don't understand what the heck's going on there. And it's not just where he finished, but the fact that George, in lap 22, George was 5th, Lewis was 14th. Lewis was behind...
me and you.
He was. Who was he trying to pass? Now I can't even find my notes here. Pierre. He was behind Pierre Gasly for the entire race. I'm confident right now that Lewis is still behind Pierre Gasly somewhere, leaving the track on the way to the airport and cannot pass him. And then the worst of the worst. I mean, this is... Mercedes has been down, but this was the hardest on lap 41 of 63. He got blue flags for Max Verstappen, who went past him. And I have to think that inside Lewis's visor and inside his mind...
It's alive.
I mean, he got lapped. Blue flags lapped. And
So-
he didn't have, like, massive problems with his car. He hadn't been in an entanglement with someone. He didn't have a missing side pod. He didn't have burnt out tires. He was fine. He was 14th, and he could not pass Pierre Gasly. And
So
the two of them were the two of them, Pierre and Lewis, were irrelevant for the entire weekend. And if you go back a year or two, that never would have been the case. I know Pierre's not going to win every race like he did at Monza that one time where it was crazy. I'm not saying he's the best, but he was Mr. Saturday for the second half of last year. He qualified strong, 5th, 6th every time. Neither one of those guys mattered. And they were just battling each other in a DRS train, like you said, behind Alex Albon in a Williams. And so, like, it blew my mind that's the point of the race we were at, that Lewis was stuck behind Pierre for like 30 laps.
Yeah, I mean, I got my father-in-law's over visiting us, and we were talking before the race started. You're saying, well, what do you think of Hamilton? Because he just doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And I kind of took the, went on the defence, and I was like, well, yeah, but, Lewis and George are kind of in roughly the same area. They've pretty much qualified in almost the same place. They're kind of both languishing down at the bottom end, so it's not like George is lighting it up and showing Hamilton up. And then the race happened and basically showed how wrong I was, because George got that car up the grid. I think he got lucky at the beginning. Maybe he made a lot of his passes under all the chaos at the beginning, but so what? He got the car there and then he kept it there. And Lewis, we kind of said that, we were talking when we started this podcast, was Lewis going to come back for the new season? And I just wonder if in his head he's resigned to the fact that the car's not good enough. Has he got that competitive fire lit up inside him to want to push every week now? Because it just looked... I don't understand how the Mercedes couldn't get past those cars. I don't.
Either.
I know they got the porpoise, and I know they're not lighting it up, and they're not going to be challenging for the World Championship, but it's still a decent car.
Well, hold on, let me correct you. I don't understand how Lewis couldn't get past him, because George did.
Yeah.
I mean, we gotta call it like we see it, right? They're pretty much the same car. That's the only person you can compare yourself apples to apples to is your teammate. And George currently has 49 points in the championship. He's 4th. It's Charles, Max, Sergio, George. He's 4th, 49 points. Lewis is 7th right now with 28 points. They're in the same car. It just blows my mind. And again, I root for many drivers, so I'm not solely a Lewis fan. But I have cheered for him. He seems like a class act and a class guy. And I cannot, in my mind, imagine what's going through his head. And when Toto, I don't know if you saw at the end of the race, Toto gets on his team radio, not his engineer, but Toto gets on and apologizes to Lewis effectively for the state of the car. Now, let's move on and just say that I've done a lot of internet sleuthing when I believe rumors and innuendo, and, we'll see. But people say, not for Miami in 2 weeks, but in a month at Barcelona, that a lot of the upgrades for Mercedes should come through and that it'll be a different race at that time. Now, I'm not, for all the Mercedes fans out there, I wouldn't go, bet your life salary on a Barcelona comeback. But I'm holding out hope, and he is one of the greatest of all time. That is undisputable. And so to me, at the end, that was my takeaway. I'm like, what in the world is going on with Lewis? And he couldn't pass Pierre. Pierre made that car. I would say he played defense, but he didn't even have to. Lewis never really got that close to him.
No, exactly. So then I think everything homes in on the front three. I was disappointed that Charles didn't seem to have the pace to be able to even to get close enough to Perez, especially once the DRS had finally been activated and we'd seen that it was working well for the Ferrari, even if it was overtaking slower cars. But he never really got there. He got there once or twice. He maybe bullied Perez into kind of making that mistake where he went across the grass.
Yes.
But didn't seem to really capitalise on it. It didn't feel... I thought Ferrari had the edge this weekend, and they'd seemed to all the way through the sessions. I know the sprint race hadn't panned out that way. And maybe what we saw that Max chasing Charles down and passing him at the end of the sprint was kind of the foreshadowing of the pace difference today. But just disappointing, I think, for Charles. And then we Yeah, go on.
Is there a chance that he'd accidentally bumped?
Slow button on, slow button on.
I don't understand what happened, and then he did have his little situation there at the the end.
Again, I'm not an F1 strategy person, but the commentators called it. They said, "Look, this is it now. The three of them can just go to the end of the race. This is our podium." And someone said, "Well, should Charles put another set of tyres on and go for the fastest lap?" And I think they said at the time, well, there's not really much point, because if he does that, he'll then pass the free pit stop forward. So he'll stop, Perez can stop, Max can stop, they'll all be on fresh rubber. So it's a big gamble for not really much of a reward of 1 point. And they were saying, what happens if a wheel gun gets stuck and he ends up dropping down the field just trying to pursue 1 point? Just take the third place. You wanted to produce something for the Tifosi. It's not going to happen, but at least take the podium. Okay, cool. 2 laps later, in comes Charles, puts the new tyres on. Everything that the commentators had kind of predicted then unfolds. Everyone, Checo goes in for his free stop. Max goes in for his free stop. Charles starts to catch him. It looks like he might get a race, but just pushes too hard. And he's going to feel...
I'm stupid.
Yeah.
I am stupid.
I know that's from Baku from a couple years ago, but I was waiting for it. I mean, that was his fault. It was his fault. He cut across that chicane too hard on the right side and lost. I mean, he was in the air.
He was in the air. All 4 wheels were in the air. I mean, it's like, you just didn't need to do that. It looked like you had the pace differential, and actually these tyres were working out better for you. New rubber seemed to be more in Ferrari's sweet spot. So just be patient. I know laps were running out, but you're getting close to the detection zone now. What's the point of going airborne over nothing good ever comes from that.
So my last thing on the race, and I have some stats I want to hit real fast, but the last thing I'd say is they brought back the cool-down room. I hadn't seen the cool-down room in a while. I don't know if it's gone away or if it was a COVID thing. But so, did you see it? Did you stay on for that part? Or
no,
were
I didn't.
back
I was sitting on the bleachers. My first soccer game of the season kicked off at 11, so I literally had to watch the last 3 laps, fully wearing all of my cleats, socks, everything, waiting.
Oh, let me cry for you. So the the cool.
At least I was exercising, fat man.
Yeah, hey, I exercised. I moved from the couch to upstairs. The cool-down room was back, and it was great. So Max and Checo and Lando, and they're sitting in this room, and they had a massive TV on one of the walls, and they showed Charles's off, and the 3 of them are just basically watching it and critiquing it, and it was hilarious to kind of get their perspective, and like they weren't making fun or anything, but it was just the 3 of them kind of observing Charles losing it, and man, it was, I don't know, I thought it was Australia 2.0. It was a couple of crazy laps to start, a big lull, and then some storylines at the end, George and Valtteri, and, the Charles making the mistake, and where did Lewis finish? I mean, all these types of things. Lando getting on the podium, which we barely even talked about. So congratulations to Lando on making the podium. That was awesome. I was really excited for him.
Talking about things we haven't even talked about, we also have to say well done to Aston Martin.
Yes. Well, let me. You know what? That's a great segue into a little bit of Saps. Sap stats. All right, so I got 4 or 5 here, and one of them is about Aston. So today was the first time, and this is something I learned, first time in F1 history that there have been consecutive Grand Slams, but with different constructors and drivers. So, of course, last race, I should say, 2 weeks ago in Australia, Leclerc had the Grand Slam. This time, of course, it was Max. So first time we've had 2 in a row, but with different people. Mercedes' George Russell in P4, and this is interesting to me, is the only driver to have finished in the top 5 at every race in 2022. So as we talk about fantasy next, something to think about, George has been P5 for Valtteri was the best result for Alfa Romeo since Brazil in 2019 when it was Kimi, and he was P4 at the time. Okay, so here's the Aston Martin one. By the way, shout out to Mike Crack. Mike Crack, good job, team principal Mike Crack. They have a double points finish, and after the opening 4 races where they'd been on 0, now all 10 teams have scored points after 4 races. That's not happened since 2018. So maybe the parity of the new car is working. And as we had said, Imola last year, Carlos asked this question.
How many mistakes I'm going to do?
How many mistakes am I going to do? Well, not a good weekend for Carlos, even though he has a new contract. He has completed just 1 lap in the last 2 Grand Prix. But the reason I highlight this is not just the lap. He'd had a 31-race finishing streak, which has gone bup in twice. So he had 31 races finishing and then 2 goose eggs and a total of 1 lap in those races. So that's for me to say I'm still bullish on Carlos, and I look forward to seeing him in Miami. And like I said, please take your voodoo doll pins out of the Carlos Sainz doll because I need him.
And with where did K-Mag finish in the end? Was he 8th today to get some more points at Haas as well as in the sprint race? He got picked up a point as well, I think. So
in the Formula One Rolex Gran Premio del Made in Italy e del Emilia Romagna 2022, Kevin Magnussen finished 9th. Actually.
9th. Okay, so I was just looking at the standings. They're at 15 now, so we're 4 races into a 23-race season. And I made the big bold prediction when we started this podcast that I felt that Haas were going to get 30 points or more this year. We got 4 races in, and we got half of them in the bag.
Yeah, but I would say he got a lot of points early, and they're dribbling in at this point. So let's not
dribbling. He's still finishing in the points.
Yeah, 2 points. He got 2 points.
Right, and remind me how many they got for all of last season?
0.
Right, so if he gets 2 points per race for the remainder of every race going, will he hit my prediction of 30?
Okay, so let's talk about fantasy.
Hello, I can't quite hear you. You seem to be breaking up, Brian.
Yeah, can't see me. So let's talk about something more exciting. Let's talk a little bit about the fantasy situation that came from this race. I first of all would like to let's start off the way we should start off. Give credit where it's due. This week, the Imola Grand Prix, whatever the hell the full title is, I just read. Team Winging It, Kelly Marie S, 254 points. She knocked it out of the park. Kudos to Kelly Marie S. Lance Stroll, Max Verstappen, Mick Schumacher, Esteban Ocon, Valtteri Bottas as her turbo driver, great call, and Red Bull as constructor. 254 blew away second place. Second place is someone who's familiar to everyone who listens to the pod, Paul Harris. Pit Lane Paul finishing second with Team No Idea. I will say this, though. I mean, he should be finishing. It's like his thing, I mean, Paul, I don't mean to put extra on you, but I'm just saying, if you had a hot wing eating competition and you didn't have me near the top, you'd be doing it wrong because I'm fat and I know what I'm doing. I mean, that's my thing. So, and then finishing third, Sophie M, Team 1. All Brits, all 3 flying British flags on their team. So kudos to all 3 top finishers this week. It is worth kind of noting, as we kind of joked, Rob and I will really focus on how we do against each other. I had 202 points this week, which is not my best week, but I'll take it, given I had Carlos and what happened there. How did you do, Robert?
201 points. It was a sickener. It was absolutely okay. I love the fact that you are such a gracious winner. You really are. But
I mean, if people could hear what I said before we came on air, then they'd really have negative feelings about me. But I am now up. I'm trying to think. So 4 races. I won 1. I won 2. I won 3. And I lost 1. So 3-1.
3-1.
So 100% of the time, I win 75% of the time. I will take it.
What? Yeah, so I was... and it all came down to... good old Mick. He was making some good headway. He got a little bit excited and went and did the same kind of trip across the grass as Checo did, and decided he wanted to do a donut. I thought the winners normally did that, but he decided he wanted to do a donut. And I was looking at the points, I was thinking, oh man, that means you're now down by whatever it was, enough lost places that you're going to be in the minus points. So I'm like, I think this is going to be close. I think this is only going to be like a point in this. So I'm like praying that someone up, because he's now like 20 seconds behind. He's never catching anybody else. Also, everybody behind him I think is retired, so at least he can't get any more negative points. So I'm getting the voodoo doll out at this point, just like stabbing anybody that's got ahead to get them to spin out. Because I was like, if he can move up one more spot, I was trying to do the math, and I'm like, I think we're going to either tie, or it might just tip me over the edge. But it wasn't to be this week. So well done, Brian. But still a long way to go yet.
I know, long season. I'm not counting any chickens. I will say for the full season, since this is nice that the website's actually working, for the full season, Red Bullino, number 1, Antonis A. Amazing job, Antonis. 908 points, first place in the Dirty Side League so far. Trying to hold on for the first half championship. The first half championship results in a prize, which will likely be a credit to the Dirty Side store, dirtysidetrack.com. Check it out. And then second place, Cy M with Team Safe Bet, 887, pretty close behind. There's this chap in third named Brian S, Team Sap, 884, 3 points behind Cy. Brian, pretty good job. Shout out to that fellow, whomever he may be. Fourth place, Edward Jason S, Gunnar Stroud, 882, right behind me on my heels, 2 points. Had a great season so far, a big week a couple ago. And then I do want to highlight fifth. He was on 100 Seconds of DRS. Mark D, DLV, Team DLV. He's my friend that we had on, and he is brand new to Formula One. So, Mark, kudos to you, man, for having a couple really strong weeks, pulling yourself into fifth. And then I just do want to highlight Liam D, Winner Chicken Dinner. He's had a couple winning weeks as well, at least tops once. He's in sixth. So, great competition. I'm excited to see where we go from here. Obviously, we have 2 weeks until Miami. We will do a riff for that in next week's episode.
And I would say go and read up on the rules around the streaks, because I don't really understand them.
I don't understand.
But this is the 5th race coming up, and I think the first sets of streaks that can kick in are for race 5. So if you can work out what they mean, it looks like the next race is the one where you might want to think about Mega Driver if you're a driver that's about to hit a streak, because if the streak comes off, then maybe it's worth it. But given I don't really understand the streaks, then maybe I don't even know what I'm talking about.
I don't get it either. So, like I said, I just picked the race, the drivers who I think will do well in a particular race. I kind of let that happen. I'm a simple man.
Okay, so we've got another 100 Seconds of DRS guest, and it ticks the box of being the guest is named either Paul or Mark. So with that, I would just like to say, hey, Paul, how you doing?
Good, Rob. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. And I'm picking up a little bit of an accent here. So I think we've so far had American guests, Australian guests, and British guests, and you're bridging two here, being an Australian in America, right?
Yeah, I am, and an American. Like, I kind of got it all covered.
Wow.
That's awesome. Paul, I thank you for joining us. And just as a note, Paul is a good friend of mine. We play softball and bowling together. And more importantly, we drink beers together, which is probably the highlight of our fun together. So thanks for joining us, man. Tell us how you got into F1. Like, I'd love to kind of know the background of when you got into it. And then did it travel with you throughout your journey around the world?
Yeah, look, I'll be super quick, Brian. Motorsport is huge in Australia, and we grew up on motorsport. The 500cc bikes, the V8 supercars, never got into the NASCAR stuff. That's not real racing to us. But and Formula One, clearly. And, we grew up with it. I was there until I was like in my 20s, would wake up at 11 at night, 12 at night for the races. Came to the US like in my mid-20s. Was able to watch every now and then, but it wasn't on that much. Then and kept up with it a bit, moved to India, lost it completely, and just was so psyched when I came back and Formula One was starting to be played on Saturday mornings on, I think it was like ESPN News or something, but I got it. So I got it again, and as soon as I was able to watch it, the bug hit, and my whole family knows Sunday morning is Formula One time. So.
and I just got one other kind of question to go on top of Brian's, is that so Brian kind of really goes overboard when he introduces people and says that they're a really good friend of his. And I think he's stressing this too much to try to let everybody know that he's got friends. So are we going to agree with the really good, or are you just kind of like mild acquaintances?
I'm going to go with really good with Brian. He is a great guy.
No, come on.
You can pick on him, but I've got to live with him half the time. So Amazing guy.
I like the qualifier. I have to live with him, so he's being nice.
And on
I'm
that,
lucky.
and on
I'm
that,
lucky.
and on that massive disappointment. No, sorry, that's from a different show. Right. Okay. So you know why you're here, Paul. We're going to do the 100 seconds of DRS. Rapid fire round of questions, some Formula Ones, some not. I think it's Brian's turn as question master, and my turn on messing up timings. So we still haven't had one of these smooth yet, I don't think, Brian. Have
You
we?
would think by now we'd have figured out how to run a 1 minute and 40-second timer, but we
I mean,
haven't.
100 seconds is a lot of time to get right. I just got to tell you guys.
It is, and the hard thing to believe is we're not counting it by hand, even though it seems like it because we screw it up so much every time. All right, Paul, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready. Rob, count us in, bud.
I will count you guys in. I will give the traditional 3, 2, 1, and we will be away. So, in 3, 2, 1, go.
Paul, who is the best F1 driver on the grid today?
I think Verstappen.
Who is your favorite F1 driver on the grid today?
Leclerc right now.
What's the first poster you had on a bedroom wall as a kid?
Michael Jordan.
Nice. What's your favorite cheese?
Probably like a Swiss cheese, like a Jarlsberg or something.
Oh, nice. Mario or Luigi?
I'm going to go with Mario, because I'm so short.
No, you're not. If you were in a pit crew, which tire would you change?
I'm going to go the back right, because it's probably the least dangerous position.
Favorite musician or musical group?
Pearl Jam.
If you could add a James Bond type gadget to an F1 car, what would it be?
Wings.
Oh, actual wings.
Yeah, no.
Oh, as opposed to hot wings. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I hear you say wings and I think you're ordering. Sleep in or up early?
Up way early. Way early.
Do you have any lucky superstitions?
No, I don't believe in that stuff.
Best F1 driver of all time?
Yeah, this is going to be cliche, but Ayrton Senna.
That's a great choice. What's your favorite country to visit?
First of all, Australia, every time, since I don't live there anymore. But once we go past that, the Maldives.
Never been. Got to add it to the list. Tires, interesting or not interesting?
Super interesting. Sorry, Rob.
And you're done.
100 seconds and we end on a high note. Paul got it right. Tires, super interesting as always. Everybody knows, except Rob.
Hey, come on! I've made you a tire picture to go on a T-shirt, and I think it's going to be a big seller in our store.
It was just uploaded today, so for all the listeners out there, a quick plug. DirtySideOfTheTrack.com. Check it out. Click on the store. You'll see a tire T-shirt, which I just purchased about 5 minutes ago.
Nice.
Paul, thank you so much, man. This was awesome. It was great talking to you and getting your perspective on F1. You are a fantastic gentleman and a good friend, and all the stuff that happens between us that no one knows about will stay that way.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, I'll just add my thanks to that, Paul, and who knows, when I'm up in Chicago soon, we might be able to hang out and have a beer, and then maybe we can actually bust Brian's chops a bit.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
Yeah, perfect.
Paul, thanks, man. Have a wonderful day. And as a reminder for all listeners, if you're interested in being on the Dirty Side 100 Seconds of DRS, please hit us up on Twitter at F1 Dirty Side. Thanks again, Paul.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, well, that was so cool to have another 100 Seconds of DRS guest on. So, like we said in the clip there, if you do want to get on board, please get in touch on Twitter. We love having people on. It's absolutely fantastic. And we thought we were pretty much going to be wrapping up now and kind of doing the preview for next week, but waiting to do a DRS interview meant that we got some late breaking news, and from somewhere in some airport in Italy, we have Pit Lane Paul phoning in his view of today's race in Imola.
Hey guys, so Imola race done. It was pretty entertaining. Decent race. Started wet. To be completely hand-on heart honest, it wasn't a classic. It got better on the first lap. Obviously, Ricciardo taking off Sainz. Sainz going for a bad time at the moment. Feel quite sorry for him. Moving onwards from that, that sort of compromised Valtteri a little bit from my side, but okay. And then, it was a case of just going around until the track decided to dry itself enough for slicks, which was a bit of a gamble because there was a chance of rain on the radar. We all thought there was more rain coming. Turned out that wasn't the case, as we all saw. So, Ricciardo was coming first, dry tyres, set green sectors. The race started then for everyone to come in and it changed to dries. No big incidents. Obviously, Velch had a pit stop issue, which was unfortunate. And then obviously we saw the incident with the Alpine coming out in front of Lewis, which that happens. Unfortunately, it's a pressure situation and all the cars coming in. And there was a marker down the pit wall, which is hard to explain to you guys, I guess, but it's a marker where if a car is in that zone, you shouldn't release the car. So they released Ocon. Well, Hamilton was inside the zone, and that's why he got the penalties. It's quite a fair rule. Every team has the same rule, and that's why when you have a situation like that, when all the cars are boxing, it becomes really hard work for the crews and for the manager of the crew who's looking out down the pit lane. He's obviously trying to get his car back into the race as quickly as possible. So it's one of those things. It's unfortunate that happens. Obviously, Valtteri was compromised as a result of his pit stop. Sadly, that put us like 12 seconds behind George Russell. Valtteri then hunted down George Russell, which was immensely satisfying for Valtteri being an ex-Mercedes person with the guy who took his seat. And Mercedes in a whole had a shocking weekend. If you think Lewis finishing where he did, getting lapped by pretty much the top 3 or 4 cars, it's a pretty embarrassing return for them guys. And the race sort of ended fairly straightforward, apart from Leclerc, who where'd you start? That's literally throwing it away in the biggest possible manner. Sometimes it's easy to say when you're not driving the car, but there we go. That's motor racing, as we always say. That is motor racing, and as gutted as he will be tonight, Red Bull will be delighted. They've managed to get themselves a good 1-2. It's great to see Lando Norris on the podium. And once again, a good spread of points for the other teams. So the season's delivering what we thought it would be. It's not going to have the classic rivalry with Lewis and Max from last year. But I think Max and Charles Leclerc are going to have some great battles this year. It's sad that this one didn't develop and he romped to what was a pretty convincing win. But it was, again, a good show of how well these cars can follow each other. So a lot to look forward to, a lot to enjoy from this race. And we move onwards to Miami, over in your great country. I'm looking forward to being there. I'm looking forward to what is going to be a crazy weekend. And yes, God bless America, as they say. However, I will say this, it's garage, it's not garage. And football is with a round ball. Take care, guys. Speak soon.
Amazing update from Pit Lane, Paul. I can't thank you enough, Paul, for doing that as you're at the airport flying out of Italy. Thank you. It is definitely garage. I hope you enjoy the time in Miami. We are really excited to close this week, and I just wanted to let everyone know that next week we will be 1 day late with our episode because of the opportunity for Rob and I to possibly record this in person together. Woo. So instead of U.S. time Sunday evening, it'll likely be late Monday night U.S. time, so about 26 hours later than normal. It should drop, is the plan. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Amazing. I enjoyed the race this week. Was it a banger? No. Was it fun to watch? Yeah. And it's always fun to talk about and participate here at The Dirty Side with everyone. So thanks to Paul. Thanks to Paul. And thanks to Rob and Brian, Paul and Paul. I had a great week. Thanks, everyone. See you in a week.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I'm really looking forward to potentially recording this in person, Brian. I'm thinking, without it being a race week, it's an in-person version of Rob versus Brian with maybe some physical forfeits involved. But we'll have to think that one over and watch this space, guys. Take it easy and keep it on the dirty side.